You will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
At the opening of the 12th session of the high-level seminar on peace and security in Africa today here in Algiers, the Algerian diplomacy chief Ahmed Attaf has called for using the Oran process as an opportunity to renew the commitment to redouble efforts in order to formulate African solutions to address Africa's issues. The International Conference on Colonial Crimes in Africa continues for the second consecutive day with workshops on issues related particularly to the impact of colonialism on the economy and culture of African countries. Algeria and 7 other member countries of OPEC Plus have confirmed a collective increase of 137,000 barrels per day in their oil production for December, of which 4,000 barrels per day are allocated to Algeria in line with their decision taken in early November. And the Palestinian presidency has condemned as terrorist attack carried out by Jewish settlers against 4 international activists in a locality in the West Bank town of Ariha. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. I'm Asya Bakar. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has chaired a meeting of the Council of Ministers that addressed several presentations in the hydrocarbons and mining, finance, knowledge economy and micro-enterprise sectors. The cabinet meeting decided to raise the minimum wage from 20,000 dinars to 24,000 dinars as of January 2026, the first increase since 2020. The Council of Ministers decided to increase the employment benefit from 15,000 dinars to 18,000, and he also instructed the Minister of Labour to review the unemployment benefit every 6 months, urging the National Employment Agency to diligently fulfill its assigned role in guiding job seekers, classifying those integrated into the labour market and distinguishing them from the unemployed in an updated national database. The President also instructed the Minister of Labour to submit proposals concerning raising pensions and retirement benefits or benefits for review by the Ministry of Finance and then the Government Council. Regarding hydrocarbons, the President stressed the need to boost efforts to complete the Hassi Messaoud refinery project in order to meet national demand for all petroleum products intended for compensation or consumption and to increase export capacity. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. The President emphasized the importance of reinforcing Naftal's exclusive role in importing and producing raw materials and oil derivatives, excluding other companies and importers who will be Naftal's primary customers for marketing its products in Algeria. Regarding the progress of preparations and prospects for the African Startup Conference, the President said the shift towards a startup economy based on an African partnership is the most successful model for building a strong, diversified economy. Now, the Minister of State in charge of Foreign Affairs, National Committee Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, has called for the Iran process to be used as an opportunity to renew the commitment to boost efforts in order to work out African solutions to address Africa's issues. In his address at the opening of the 12th session of the high-level seminar on peace and security in Africa today here in Algiers, Mr. Attaf called for this edition to be an opportunity to renew the commitment to advocate for African priorities with a single voice within the United Nations Security Council and in the various fora of international multilateral action. He also expressed pride to see the high-level seminar on peace and security in Africa become an annual event and tradition that focus on peace and security on the continent.
نعتز ونفخر أولاً.
First, we are proud that the Oran process has become a fixed and official continental event on the agenda of our continental organization and its esteemed African Peace and Security Council. Second, we are filled with pride that the 3 African states on the Security Council have come to form a single united bloc, a bloc with a well-known name, a consolidated identity, official positions, and whose stance and opinions are taken into account and respected. Third, We are proud that Africa has reached a level that no other continent has reached before, the level of delegating the defense of its interests and priorities to its representatives on the United Nations Security Council.
للمرافعة عنها وعن أولوياتها.
Regarding Algeria's two-year mandate at the Security Council, Mr. Attaf said Algeria advocated for Africa's interests at the UN and always defended the continent's interests.
ونحن نتأهب اليوم لاختتام عهدتنا بمجلس الأمن الأممي.
Today, as we prepare to conclude our term on the United Nations Security Council, we hope to have lived up to the responsibilities we bear to our African continent and our African brothers and sisters, together with our brothers and sisters in the Republic of Somalia and the Republic of Sierra Leone. We have sought to form a cohesive bloc in the Security Council, a bloc that expresses African rather than national positions on matters related to peace and security in our continent. In this regard, we have ensured that our positions are based on the decisions of the African Union and that our initiatives are in accordance with the guidelines of our Peace and Security Council.
المكلف بالسلم والأمن.
That was the statement of Ahmed Attaf at the opening of the 12th session of the high-level seminar on peace and security in Africa here in Algiers. And also, Mr. Ahmed Attaf discussed earlier with his Tunisian counterpart, Mr. Mohamed Ali Al-Nafti, the remarkable momentum in cooperation between the two brotherly countries. This came on the occasion of the International Conference on Colonial Crimes in Africa and the holding of today's seminar. Both parties emphasized the need to strengthen this momentum ahead of the meeting of the Algerian-Tunisian Joint High Commission in the coming days. Separately, Ahmed Attaf met with his Ivorian counterpart, who currently chairs the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. The two ministers exchanged views on the main points on the agenda of this session, emphasizing the importance of strengthening the role of the Oran process as a forum for consultation, coordination, and unification of African positions at the UN Security Council, particularly on issues of peace and security on the continent. The two officials also reaffirmed their commitment to preparing for upcoming bilateral meetings in the best possible way, serving the interests of their two brotherly countries and peoples. The Algerian diplomacy chief also met with the UN Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, with whom he examined the latest developments in the security situation in Africa and the challenges facing peacekeeping operations as one of the key aspects illustrating the UN commitment to the African continent. The two parties also exchanged views on the situation in the Sahel and the latest developments concerning the issue of Western Sahara. Still in Algiers, the Secretary of State to the State Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of African Affairs, Mrs. Bakhta Salma Mansouri, has received Ghana's Deputy Foreign Minister. The visit held outside the International Conference on the Crimes of Colonialism in Africa focused on the examining of bilateral relations, considering the solid political ties linking the two countries. Now, the International Conference on Colonial Crimes in Africa has continued for the second consecutive day and last day at the Abdel Taif Al International Conference Center here in Algiers, and Masoud Sharfi gives us the details.
The second day of the conference includes workshops on issues related particularly to the impact of colonialism on the economy and culture of African countries. An Algiers declaration will conclude the proceedings. The document will serve as a continental reference, shedding light on colonial crimes and the recognition of their effects. It will be submitted for adoption at the next AU Summit in February 2026. The chair of the Pan-African Parliament, Fortune Charambera, said that the declaration is crucial to clearly define the problem and commit to real action instead of endless talk.
The declaration helps of a common purpose, common understanding and common purpose. We need a declaration so to be able to know what is the problem, how the problem, why it exists, and how we should do, what solutions do we need. So we need a declaration, because otherwise we just talk and talk without any commitment. It's a commitment to action. So we need a declaration.
On the first day of the conference, the Minister Ahmed Attaf called for the official recognition and international criminalization of colonial crimes. while participants discussed their lasting impact, reflecting the AU's 2025 theme on justice and reparations. In the same connection, and at a workshop held on the sidelines of the conference, the director of the National Archives, Mohammed Bounama, said colonizers used segregation and racism to assert superiority, committing crimes including genocide, resource plundering, and attacks on cultural identity. For his part, French historian Vincent Duclert highlighted the long-term tragedies of segregation, citing the Tutsi genocide in Rwanda involving Belgium and France. Speaking during the debate, historian and professor at Sheikh Anta Diop University, Senegal, noted that 6 African slaves died for everyone who survived the transatlantic trade. The vice chair of the Caribbean Community CARICOM Reparations Commission, CRC, Eric Phillips, stressed that colonialism's lasting impact demand action to move from victims to architects of justice.
Also, African officials once again deconstructed the colonial system during the International Conference on Colonial Crimes in Africa held here in Algiers, demanding the official and explicit recognition of the crimes committed against their peoples for centuries.
In his opening speech at the conference held under the high patronage of President Abdelmajid Tebboune, the Minister of State in charge of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, said that Africa has the right and every right to demand the official and explicit recognition of the crimes committed against its people during the colonial period. Mr. Attaf stressed that recognition is the first step to address colonialism's impact and affirm Africa's right to its international criminalization. African officials noted the conference aims to consolidate action to classify colonialism, slavery, segregation, and apartheid as crimes against humanity under AU recommendations. In the same context, the Sahrawi Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Mohammed Islam Baysat, speaking during his participation in a high-level ministerial session held as part of the International Conference on Colonial Crimes in Africa, affirmed that the occupation of land and the denial of the legitimate right of peoples to life and self-determination is the intrinsic essence of colonialism, regardless of its justifications or continental affiliations. He explained that colonialism, driven by greed and denial of people's rights, disguises exploitation as civilizing missions. He noted it's persistent in Africa and the Caribbean, criticized major powers for failing decolonization, and highlighted Algeria's role and UN Resolution 1514 in advancing African independence.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and the Minister of State, Minister of Hydrocarbons and Mines, Mohamed Arkaba, has received here in Algiers the Chairman and CEO of the Saudi company Midad Energy North Africa, Sheikh Abdullah bin Mohammed bin Abdullah Al Aiba. Mr. Sharfi again.
During the meeting held in the presence of the CEO of the Sonatrach Group, Mr. Nuruddin Daudi, and ministry officials, they examined state of bilateral relations and the prospects of cooperation between the Sonatrach Group and Midad Energy in the hydrocarbon sector, particularly following the signing of a hydrocarbon production sharing contract between the two companies relating to exploration and production operations in the Elysee South contractual area located in the Elysee Basin. The two parties assessed the progress achieved as part of consultations with the aim of establishing a joint roadmap for the contract's entry into force. The two parties also discussed other new partnership and investment opportunities in the different stage of the oil and gas industry value chain, including the development of strategic projects aimed at strengthening the exchange of expertise, knowledge transfer, and human skills development in exploration and production, both in Algeria and abroad. On this occasion, the minister emphasized the strong brotherly relations between the two countries and the importance of promoting an economic partnership based on mutual interests, serving the energy vision of both countries. For his part, Sheikh Abdullah bin Mohammed bin Abdullah Al Aibani expressed his company's interest in strengthening its investment presence in Algeria, given the promising opportunities guaranteed by the hydrocarbon sectors. He reaffirmed the company's commitment to developing its strategic cooperation with the Sonatrach Group and to accelerate the pace of implementation of joint projects by adopting cutting-edge technologies in the oil and gas industry in the best interest of both parties.
And Algeria and 7 other member countries of OPEC Plus have confirmed a collective increase of 137,000 barrels per day in their oil production for December, of which 4,000 barrels per day are allocated to Algeria in line with their decision taken in early November. Now to the Middle East, the Palestinian presidency has announced and condemned a terrorist attack carried out by Jewish settlers against 4 international activists in a locality in the West Bank town of Ariha. It warned against the seriousness of such terrorist attacks that run counter international law. With this, we come to the end of our news bulletin, and now as Algeria hosts the first international conference on the crimes of colonialism in Africa, our colleague Masoud Shorfi spoke with Mr. Eric Phillips, Vice Chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. Let's listen to this interview.
Welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Masoud Shorfi reporting from Algiers, where the first international conference on crimes of colonialism in Africa is taking place. This historic event aims to address the long-lasting consequences of colonialism, explore mechanisms for justice and reparations, and promote a unified African stance on historical justice. I'm pleased today to be joined by the Vice Chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, CRC, Mr. Eric Phillips. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
My pleasure, thank you.
How do you see the conference advancing the discussion on reparations for communities affected by colonialism?
It's a very important conference because each part of the world, the Caribbean, Africa Union, Latin America, they've been working separately. In Algeria, we're bringing all of these groups together so that we can form partnerships, the Africa Union and CARICOM, the Africa Union and CARICOM, the United States, the Africa Union and CARICOM, United States, Latin America. So we're here together to talk about issues about colonialism, about slavery, about reparations, and to form a common strategy about how we approach it. So it's a very important conference, and Algeria is taking a very important lead.
The Algiers Declaration is expected to guide Africa's approach to historical justice. What kind of impact do you think it will have on policy making and reparations program?
We will have a concerted effort to put together a strategy that unifies us, because we're all speaking to the same colonizers, whether you're in Africa, whether you're in the Caribbean, whether you're in Latin America. So the declaration will give us ideas and strategies and mechanisms and timelines as to how we can work together to make it ourselves more effective.
So how can African nations coordinate to ensure that discussions or reparations lead to concrete actions rather than just statements?
In September, there was a big meeting in Ethiopia with the Africa Union and the Caribbean. There was a joint declaration. In December, we're going to be forming expert teams, lawyers, historians, and strategists, so that we can have a common approach to reparations, not just for Africa, but for the diaspora, global Africa.
So beyond the material reparations, how important is the recognition of historical injustices and cultural restitutions for healing and unity?
Very, very important. In the Caribbean, for example, yes, we have a 10-point plan. The first is an apology. We need the colonizers to recognize what they've done, their crimes against humanity, and to apologize. Secondly, a lot of indigenous groups were killed, so we're asking for an indigenous development program. Third, we're asking for repatriation and resettlement, because many people in the Caribbean and other parts of the world want to go back to Africa, but they can't go back without some strategy to resettle them, to give them citizenship. Fourth, we're asking about illiteracy eradication, our school system. We have a lot of kids who are failing math and English because the school systems we inherited are bad. We're looking at health. Barbados is the amputation capital of the world. Most of the people in the Caribbean are predisposed to type 2 diabetes and to chronic diseases and hypertension. So we're looking at how to address that. We're looking at psychological repair. You know, there's so much stigmatism, there's so much mental slavery. Some people want to change their skin color, you know, they feel inferior. So we're looking at programs to do that. Then we're looking at debt relief and financial compensation. We're also looking at the right to development. So we want to work with Europe, with technology, so that we can grow, deal with climate change, deal with all the other issues. So it's a holistic program that we're working on, and we're now In the Caribbean, we're sharing that with Algeria, we're sharing that with the African Union, we're sharing that with Latin America. So we'll have a 10-point plan. It's not just about money. It's about health, it's about education, it's about mental slavery, it's about restitution of things that were stolen, etc.
Sir, what role do you think international organizations and former colonial countries should play in supporting Africa's reparations and justice efforts?
Well, there are many mechanisms in place at the United Nations. United Nations Human Rights Committee, the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. There's a SWORD Convention on eradication of So those mechanisms are in place. Now, with CARICOM and the African Union, we're looking to see how we can embolden and strengthen these institutions so that they can become more active in terms of pursuing reparations.
So what does this conference mean for communities whose families were affected by colonialism, both in Africa and the diaspora?
This conference is critical. It's a pivoting point. It's a turning point where Africa and the Caribbean are now coming together to sit down in a room for 2 days to speak about the human and generational issues, to speak about environmental harm, to speak about healing, to speak about reclaiming identity. So this is very important here.
What forms of reparations or compensation would be meaningful for affected communities?
It depends on the harms. There were so many different harms. And so we want to work on it systematically. Development is one issue because we're under development. Education systems, health, those types. So the 10-point plan covers that.
So how can collaboration between African states, regional organizations, and diaspora communities strengthen the outcomes of this conference?
We'll have a common vision, we'll have a common strategy, we will have an implementation timeline, we'll have roles and responsibilities clearly defined. We can go and sit down with the European nations as partners instead of separately.
Indeed.
So it's about collaboration, it's about unity, it's about a common vision.
The conference aims to adopt the Algiers Declaration. How do you think this declaration could guide Africa's efforts for reparation, restitution, and historical justice?
It will be our blueprint. What comes out of here will be very, very critical in how we pursue reparations collectively. So this is a blueprint.
Thank you, Mr. Eric Philip, Vice Chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, CRC, for sharing your views on reparations and justice from Algiers. This is Mr. Al-Sharfi to Radio Algeria International.
Hello and welcome to our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news.